The global trading system has been a source of prosperity, predictability, and stability for now over 6 decades. It has provided with an environment that has helped many countries to develop and to use this development to reduce poverty through trade opening and a multilateral rules-based system.
Has it? The struggle of the Nigerian textile industry began with the termination of the multi-fiber agreement on January 1, 1995, and its subsequent replacement with the World Trade Organization's agreement on textiles and clothing. The multi-fiber agreement, which hitherto imposed quotas on the amount of clothing and textile that developing countries could export to developed nations, gave way to international free trade policy, opening countries for limitless importation. Analysts believe that African countries and other developing nations are at a disadvantage in an open market due to infrastructure deficit.
Because the West, the EU and the West were being threatened by the export from the African countries in terms of cotton, in terms of yarn and fabric. All right, so they could not contain the surge, okay, that was coming, the surge of goods that was coming from the developing countries, from African countries, from some of the Asian countries. So EU met with the US and said, no, we need to control. We need to control by way of putting quotas, all right, that these developing countries are bringing in their fabrics and their yarns, all right? And that was what gave birth to multi-fiber arrangements, all right? And it simply means how much you can bring to a particular market. What is the quota that has been earmarked for you to bring in? And every decent economy does that. No economy will fold its hands and just watch you bring in goods as much as you want, whether they are standard or they are substandard, nobody cares. No. So that was what led to the establishment of multi-fiber arrangements. Okay, so later on, that span between 1974 to 2005. Finally, it was off by 2005. And by the time it was lifted by World Trade Organization, everybody was free to ship their goods and particularly the textile materials all over the world, however you wanted it.
With the phasing out of the multi-fiber agreement in January 2005, many textile mills in Nigeria began to feel the heat of competing with cheap imports from China, among other Asian countries. Nigeria was already 6 years into civilian administration under the then President Olusegun Obasanjo after a series of military regimes.
I, Olusegun Obasanjo, do solemnly swear.
By 2008, over 160 textile companies had closed, with capacity utilization estimated at less than 20%. Only 10 companies employing barely 18,000 workers from the 250,000 employed previously were struggling to remain in business. 13 days before vacating office, the Federal Executive Council in May 2007 under former President Olusegun Obasanjo announced the award of contracts worth 176 billion naira. Briefing newsmen after the meeting, Frank Nweke, then Minister of Information, said 70 billion naira was earmarked for the revival of textile industries across the nation. Daily Trust reported that checks were duly issued and beneficiaries smiled to the bank but got the shock of their lives. The checks bounced and government gave a plausible explanation, arguing that the checks were merely symbolic and not cashable financial instruments. According to the report, Nexim Bank and the federal government were unable to source funds when Merrill Lynch backed out of the deal. Thereafter, United Bank for Africa came to the rescue. However, the bank reportedly charged 10% interest on the 70 billion naira, and on this point, it disagreed with the federal government, leading to a halt in disbursement.
It is still morning in Nigeria. Democracy is just 8 years old. Our nation has changed for the better, but there is much left to do.
In 2009, the Umaru Yar'Adua administration formally inaugurated the Cotton, Textile and Garment Revival Fund of 100 billion naira to revamp the industry back to its glory days. Figures by the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria reveal that the capacity utilization in the sector increased significantly from 29.14% in 2010 to 49.70% in 2011. The initiative, managed by the Bank of Industry through loans to textile companies in 2013, disclosed that about 60 billion naira was disbursed to various beneficiaries under the intervention scheme, and that resulted in the reopening of United Nigeria Textiles Limited in Kaduna. In a report by Premium Times, February 2013, the ex-Vice President of the Nigeria Labour Congress and General Secretary of the National Union of Textile Garment and Tailoring Workers of Nigeria, Isa Aremu, said that 38 textile firms have benefited from the Nigerian government's 100 billion naira Cotton, Textile and Garment Revival Scheme. Also attributing a statement to the former Minister of Trade and Investment, Olusegun Ogonga, the report said that the 100 billion naira loan CGT fund, several hitherto moribund textile mills have been reopened with about 8,000 jobs saved, while over 5,000 new jobs were created. However, the list of beneficiaries, criteria for release and who got what amount remains controversial. Even more critical is the decision of government to lift the ban on the importation of textile barely a year after the inauguration of the Cotton, Textile and Garment Revival Fund, as it was not without its consequences. Barely 25 textile mills are still in operation in the entire country, most of them operating at less than 20% capacity. United Nigeria Textiles Limited in Kaduna is one of the mills said to have benefited from the government's intervention. However, our investigation reveals that no activity was taking place at the complex when we visited. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, the mill operated at about 20% capacity before the impact of the lockdown. In May 2017, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, as acting president, signed Executive Order 3, instructing government institutions to give preference to domestic manufacturers, contractors and service providers in its procurement. Furtherance to this, the Governor of Central Bank of Nigeria, Godwin Emefiele, in July 2019, brought together the service chiefs and chief executives of paramilitary institutions and stakeholders in the cotton, textile and garment industry to seek ways of collaboration to revive the sector. According to the CBN governor, CBN's model in achieving the presidential directive as contained in Executive Order 003 is to facilitate long-term contracts with textile and garment factories to produce uniforms for armed forces and uniform services using local fabrics and textile materials.
One quick example that highlights the potentials of this local market includes the need to support provision of uniforms and clothing apparels for students, military and paramilitary officers, as well as workers in the industrial sector. In addition, when we consider the amount spent on outfits for religious and social events, such as weddings, naming and funeral ceremonies on a weekly basis, the potential market size is well over $4 billion annually. Under the Anchor Price program, we intend to improve the linkage between cotton farmers and ginneries by ensuring that ginneries are able to obtain the high quality cotton produced by these farmers.
The whole idea is take the cotton value chain. Let's start from agriculture. CBN financed inputs.
Felix Egbemona is the chairman of FEMRO 3, a textile manufacturing company based in Lagos, one of the beneficiaries of government intervention in the cotton, textile and garment industry.
I was given over 1 billion at 4.5% interest rate per annum with a tenure of 20 years. That's why my factory is functioning today. The company was actually struggling at a point, but with these interventions I highlighted earlier on, the business has picked up, and our facilities with the bank, the CBN funds we assessed, the facilities are performing, and our payments are up to date, and the company is doing well.
This letter confirms the quality of some of these items produced by FEMRO 3 upon sample evaluation by nominees of the Nigerian Army at the stakeholders meeting.
We gathered at the CBN. After intense negotiation, the Nigerian Textile Manufacturers Association signed MOU with the military in line with Executive Order 003, stopping the military and the uniform agencies from importing uniforms. But I can tell you that a lot of factories that were hitherto closed have been revived. Employments have been retained, and these factories that are open have provided employment for quite a number of people, you know, and it's just a beginning, because this started the Anchor Borrowers program as it affects the cotton value chain. Actually started in 2019, you know, so we've just had 2 years of operation, and many ginneries have been refurbished, many ginneries are now functioning, and farmers are empowered, you know. Because of some amount of technology had also been applied. Before, our cotton in the international market was priced very low. But now that we've adopted the various technology that is needed to keep our cotton top rate, you know, our cotton is well priced right now.
Under the Anchor Borrowers program, the Central Bank of Nigeria, through the National Cotton Association of Nigeria, distributed cotton input to over 150,000 farmers in 33 states, cultivating over 180,000 hectares of cotton that will feed ginneries and be used in the production of high-quality textile for use by the armed forces and other uniformed service organizations.
I mean, for instance, when we directly, from our perspective, the CTG value chain has been supported under the CBN, Central Bank of Nigeria's Anchor Borrowers program. Now, what they did is not only did they support cotton cultivation by smallholder farmers across the country. As I speak to you, there are more than we are 33 states in the country now that produce cotton, and CBN has recognized that, and they've tried to support that cotton production. The farmers, I can tell you from cultivation perspective, for instance, as president of the National Cotton Association of Nigeria, before our participation, we were about maybe 67,000 farmers, and I think the countrywide production will not be more than 80,000 metric tons countrywide. But as I speak to you today, We're well above 200,000 in terms of membership, and production in the country has hit close to 200,000 metric tons. And I say that not just saying that, oh, because National Cotton, NACOTAN, produced that cotton, but the intervention in the cotton program under the Anchor Borers program stimulated those that were lucky to be part of it and those that want to go and cultivate cotton, because now there's a sense of, yes, there's a revival coming, and I'll produce cotton because you can't eat cotton, but at least somebody will be there to buy. So these impacts are there. It's a matter of really wanting to know. If you really want to know, go to a typical cotton farming community. They will tell you.
The federal government, through the Central Bank of Nigeria's Anchor Borers programs, says that 44 billion naira has been disbursed to 200,000 cotton farmers in 3 years. This farm is one of those farms where that money is being deposited. But this beneficiary, just like many others, constantly live in fear of being attacked by bandits and other criminal elements. Input. At the time of our visit, distribution of the input for the second season of CBN intervention has since commenced. In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Central Bank of Nigeria in July 2020 announced the approval of 50 billion naira special mechanism funds to revive the ailing textile industry. The funds is to be administered by the Bank of Industry at 4.5% interest rate. The resolutions reached at the meeting where the textile mills articulate the status of their BOI cotton, textile and garment loans, stating their outstanding balances, tenure, interest rate, interest payment and the assistance being sought from the central bank. Despite these monetary intervention, unfavorable policies and infrastructural deficit continues to water down the impact of government efforts. In what experts have described as a policy somersault, the Nigerian government lifted the ban on the importation of textile products. In 2016, the NBS statistics stated that Nigeria recorded $4 billion worth of imported fabrics into Nigeria. A recent study titled China-Africa Relations, the Northern Nigeria Textile Industry by Afolabi Toye, suggests that the decision could have been reached to clear every trade obstacle for the Chinese to access the Nigerian market in return for more Beijing financial support. The Central Bank of Nigeria has placed access to foreign exchange for all forms of textile materials on the Forex restriction list. However, smugglers have continued to wreak havoc. The Nigeria Customs Service say recent closure of the land borders and diplomatic engagements with Nigeria's neighboring countries has yielded significant results.
Between January to December 2020, we were able to make a number of 17,293 seizures, a number of times seizures of textile material, especially printed matters like atampa and all that were made, 17,293 with a duty paid value of 1,707,000,000 and then 127,000 naira. So that tells you the kind of success we are recording from such anti-smuggling operations. And then January to July already, we've recorded 8,573 number of times we've made seizures of textile material with a duty paid value of over 479 million naira. So that's our success story in terms of dealing with smuggling of textile material, and we'll continue to do that. What is important is for Nigerians to realize that smugglers are enemies of state, and therefore we should not provide the kind of information that will aid their trade, because our experience has been that fellow Nigerians, we give information to smugglers about our movements.
But despite the seizures made, arrest and conviction of those behind smuggling activities remains shrouded, as they often operate as cartels and networks. According to the International Textile Manufacturers Federation, power supply accounts for about 15% production cost in the textile industry. However, inadequate and high cost of energy in the textile industry has been one of the major impediments to investment in the sector. Nigeria is endowed with large oil, gas, hydro and solar resources, and it has the potential to generate 12,522 megawatts of electric power from existing plants, but dispatches around 4,000 megawatts daily for a country of over 200 million people. Amidst the erratic supply of power, the federal government intends to end the current subsidy being paid on electricity by the end of 2021. In the next episode of Nigerian Textile Returning to Glory Days, we examine why government intervention has failed to yield the desired results.